Hi, Year 9. Welcome back. Today we're looking at metaphors in the text. So let's get started. So, in this lesson, you will learn about Stevenson's use of metaphor in the text, including how weather events are used to enhance descriptions. So, what is a metaphor? A metaphor is a comparison between things with common characteristics that are suggested or even hidden. A simile, on the other hand, is a comparison between two things using the words like or as. For example, so this is my example. The tree reached its arms out towards the sun. A tree doesn't actually have arms, so it can't literally reach its arms out. But it does have branches. Its branches can act as its arms, as if it were human and reaching to the sky. So notice how this comparison does not use like or as, and therefore is not a simile. So now I would like you to think of a metaphor for these images and write it down. So this is our first image. It's of a sun. Next one is of a lion, and the third one is a storm or a lightning bolt. So what kind of metaphor would you be able to think of in relation to these images? So once you've done that, you can then move on with the video. So next we're going to look at nature metaphors. Okay, so Stephen uses several nature metaphors to add colour to his descriptions of characters and events. In other words, Stevenson compares events in the novel to things in nature so that readers can better understand how the character or event may have looked. Edward Hyde commits two crimes that we know of during the course of the narrative. At the beginning of the novel, he mercilessly runs over a young girl who does survive. Later, he beats Sir Danvers Carow to death with a cane that Gabrielle Utterson had given to Henry Jekyll. Stevenson's narrator describes the scene with ape-like fury. He was trampling his victim underfoot and hailing down a storm of blows. So there is no literal storm, of course, but the beating resembles the sound and fury of a storm. And that is the metaphor. So let's take a look at the quotation without the metaphors. With fury, he was trampling his victim underfoot and blows. Adding in the metaphor, hailing down a storm of blows, allows readers to picture the violence with which Hyde murders Carow. In addition, the natural metaphor functions to indicate Hyde's non-human state. His physical force is something out of nature, rather than humanity. So that's a really, really important point. And this is how we're going to take our answers from just making a point and giving evidence to actually analysing what's going on here, analysing what is going on with this metaphor. So as you can see, this is a PEA chain, so point evidence analysis. So my question to you is, what context could we use to develop this chain? How could we make it a PEAC chain? What context would you use? Okay, once you've answered that question, let's move on. So we're going to look at nature metaphors again, but this time with water. So as you can see, this picture here, I think, describes the metaphor really, really well. So we're looking for that hidden meaning, something suggested or insinuated, not necessarily explicitly described. Okay. So later on, Utterson laments of Jekyll. My mind misgives me is his deep... My mind misgives me he is in deep waters. Okay, so he is in deep waters. Here Utterson describes Jekyll's mental state as in too deep. To use another phrase, he is metaphorically drowning. So from this, we can also get that he cannot rise to the surface of the rational world, and therefore he feels like he is drowning, even though he's literally not drowning. That's why it's a metaphor. So again, if we remove the metaphor, Utterson's quotation would lose its appeal. it would say, "My mind misgives me, he is in trouble." The image of Jekyll sinking under the weight of his desires adds flavour to Utterson's words. Metaphors allow readers to understand characters, scenes, and events in new ways, rather than merely reading about them with precise description. So as you can see, we've got our point here in green, we've got our evidence in blue, and then we've got our analysis here in red. So let's look at one more metaphor in which Stevenson reverses the trend and describes a natural object using human properties. The narrator describes the ominous nighttime setting with a pale moon lying on her back as though the wind had tilted her. So obviously the moon does not have a back, and it can neither lie down nor tilt, but adding these human characteristics brings the natural object to life, allowing it to become a character in the scene that foreshadows the disastrous events that follow. So again, I've given you point, evidence, and some analysis. So what I want you to do now is add some context to this chain and even some effect. So effect is the effect on the reader. How are we feeling when we're reading these types of metaphors? Okay, so that's your task. Right, next. We have Hyde as a metaphor. So Stevenson is rather explicit about the wordplay of Hyde's name. In fact, at one point, Utterson declares, "I shall be Mr. Seek." It is at this point that Utterson becomes an amateur detective in the novel, piecing together clues to discover whom Hyde is and what happened to Jekyll. So in other videos, I've quite often mentioned the kind of wordplay on Hyde, Hyde as in Hyde's name, and Hyde as in hide and seek. So it's a pun because it's a play on words, but this also makes it a metaphor in the text as well. So Hyde quite literally hides in the shadows of the novel, skulking around at night and committing crimes. But the metaphor does not stop there. Hyde is also another type of Hyde, but this time in the sense of an animal pelt. Thus, Stevenson establishes Hyde's animal nature. Hyde is a degenerate, ape-like being. So finally, when Utterson breaks into Jekyll's laboratory, he sees Hyde's dead body dressed in Jekyll's clothes. At this point, we are able to believe that Jekyll has completely lost control of the transformation. He did not even have time to change clothes, for Hyde is much smaller. Thus, Hyde is under the hide of Jekyll, the clothes that make him a professional member of polite society. Had the suicide not happened, perhaps Hyde would have made more trouble in Jekyll's hide. Okay, so make notes there if you want to. And regarding the quiz for today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to post it on the team's page, okay, so that if there's any misconceptions, we can deal with them on the chat rather than under assignments. Okay, so I will post that today when this video goes live, and we can go through that together. So let's just do a quick review on what we've learnt today. So these are my points, my main points for today, which are: a metaphor is a comparison between similar things without using like or as. Stevenson uses many metaphors in the text to add colour to the narrative. He often compares natural events or things to descriptions of characters or scenes. And finally, Stevenson also uses the wordplay of hide and hide as a metaphor for how Hyde acts and exists in the novel. Okay, so final task is to write down something of your own that you have learnt from this lesson. So not any of these three things. And then, yep, just complete the mini quiz that I will set to you on the Teams page, and that is it for today. Thank you for listening.